Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Hashley, and I'm the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. Welcome to the Ag Technology Platforms and Online Software to Manage Risks workshop series. We're delighted to have you here this evening. And I wanted to introduce ourselves a little bit. And let's see, there's my contact information. And if you would like, introduce yourself as I'm going through a little intro about New Entry. You're welcome to rename yourself. Sometimes when people log on, they find that their child or spouse or someone else used their Zoom room. And so it's helpful if you want to rename yourself, how you'd like to be referred to. You'd like to add your pronouns so we can refer to you appropriately. Maybe add your farm name and where you're located. That's always helpful. We just ask everyone to stay muted until the question and answer session, or if we say, please unmute yourselves and ask your questions, that would be great just to minimize the background noise. And please use the chat feature to ask questions as we go of the presenters. I'll be monitoring the chat so that we can make sure to answer your questions and get what you would like out of this workshop. You're welcome to leave your video on, or it's optional. We will be recording the session, so this is being recorded. So if you'd like to leave yourself off video, you're welcome to do that. So the mission of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, your host for this series, is really our goal is to improve our local and regional food systems by training the next generation of farmers and making that food accessible to everyone. And we do that through a number of program areas, through our farmer training programs, our food hub, and our national field network initiative, which I'll talk about these briefly in a second. So our farmer training programs include our courses and workshops. We do our business planning course, our crop production course, a bunch of workshops like this series, and we run an incubator farm training program where we provide access to land for folks to farm for up to 3 years if you've completed our business planning course. Just doing a shameless plug here, our crop production course, it will be starting in this spring if you're looking to get some hands-on practical experiential training on an organic farm. We have a half-acre demonstration plot here and do some hybrid online and in-person instruction in organic vegetable growing. So I encourage you to look for that if you're interested. And then our next farm business planning course will be held in the fall. We're doing our winter session now, which started a few weeks ago in early January, goes through March. It's been hosted online during the pandemic. It may resume to be a hybrid or in-person course in the fall to be determined, but that is another opportunity if you're interested in going deeper with business planning. We do have a lot of other virtual tours, videos, all the recordings of this Ag Technology series is posted to our YouTube channel, which I will send a link to in the follow-up. Our Food Hub program, as I mentioned, is another extension of our farmer training program. We do run a CSA and food access and do some other market-based training. So there's some programming that may come out of that you might be interested in. And then if you are interested in learning more about incubator farm programs and apprenticeship programs, our national field school and networks do a lot of technical assistance in that area. We're currently partnering with the Maine Organic Farming and Gardening Association group as well, that you'll hear from one of our speakers there, to do a mentor training series on Monday afternoons throughout the winter months. So I encourage you to check that out. So this workshop series that you're participating in this evening is part of a bigger risk management workshop series. We've covered these topics here so far. In our series, we've done 3 workshops on legal risk with a farmland focus around finding and assessing and leasing and or purchasing farmland. So check those out. We've partnered with Land for Good and National Young Farmer Coalition for those workshops. And then we moved into our financial risk series. We talked about record keeping software platforms, moving from Excel to QuickBooks, using point of sale data, financial management, all that. And now we are finishing up our production risk workshops this evening. So last week we did some enterprise budgeting software programs and thinking about that. Tonight we'll hear about keeping records for soil health and organic certification, and production focused a little bit more. And then our February workshops move into marketing risks. So we'll talk a lot about all the different e-commerce online sales platforms, introduce you to many of those throughout that series. So that's exciting to come. All of the resources from this series are posted to this page of our website. I'll send this link in the follow-up. It lists all the workshops. You just scroll all the way to the bottom of the page. The workshop recordings are listed there, and any of the handouts, resources, or web links that presenters reference during the workshops will also be listed there. So you can always come back to this page and find that information. we'll be turning a lot of those resources into fact sheets in the next couple months. So those will be there, replacing some of the link by link notes. Just wanted to thank our funder, the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Program, for supporting the series. They made it free for all of us and helped covering the speaker time and staff time for the series. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. They're funding it, but they do expect us to assess knowledge gain before and after and through workshop evaluations of the series. So I will be sending a link to the workshop evaluation out after the session tonight. And we really hope folks will take the time. It's just a few questions. And with that, I'm going to launch our first poll, just sort of an easy way for you to help us assess your knowledge of this topic area before we get started. So there's two questions I'd like for you to answer. One is, how would you rate your knowledge of farm production risks? Just kind of very general. You can interpret that to mean whatever you would like. It's a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being no understanding and 5 being complete understanding. So if you could just respond to that, we'd appreciate it. And then the second question is, specifically, how might you rate your knowledge of managing soil health and organic certification practices? And it's pretty broad in general, but just get a sense of what knowledge we have here in the room. So I'll leave that open for a few more minutes here while I introduce our speakers. So thank you so much again to Chris Grigsby, Grigsby, who's the Director of Certification for the Maine Organic Farming and Gardening Association, MOFGA. He's been their certification director for 5 years and has worked extensively in the food system throughout New England. And he will be joined by Jed Beach, who's the owner of 3 Bug Farm and with his wife and children, and then also operates FarmSmart. So I guess you also have a farm consulting business and years of helping other farmers with probably exactly what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we're honored to have you both here with us this evening. So thank you so much for coming. And I'll stop sharing my screen and I'll end the poll. I think hopefully everyone's had a chance to respond. And I'll turn it over to you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. Just get myself situated here with the screen share. And oh, no, that's not the right one. Sorry. Hang on a second here. Whoops. Hold on real quick. Sorry about that. Sorry, switching between PowerPoint and Google Slides, those types of things. Apologies. Okay, is everybody seeing that okay? Great. All right, well, yeah, as Jennifer mentioned, I'm Chris Grigsby, the Director of Certification, at MOFGA, Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here and to present to you. I know, sometimes record keeping for organic certification, those types of things aren't the most glamorous points of farming, but they are important for a variety of reasons. And so I do like to chat with folks about them because I think they're important for a number of reasons. And yeah, so generally MOFGA certification services. So we're based in Maine. Our service territory currently is Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts. Mostly in Maine, we certify over 500 operations to all 4 of the production scopes under the USDA organic regulations. So we're an accredited certifier of the USDA. We've been certifying farms as organic since the 70s. And when the National Organic Program was created from the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990, MOFGA created MOFGA Certification Services as an LLC. So we're solely owned by MOFGA, our parent company, and we've been accredited by the USDA since 2002 when they began the program there. So I wanted to start with the organic regulations because that's kind of what ties all of this together. Those are that's the piece that we certify to. Those are the requirements that anyone who's a certified operation is required to be compliant with. And so outside of all the other parts of, either the production components of the USDA regs or some of the administrative pieces, those types of things. I'm focusing in today on the record keeping section based on the discussion and the topic at hand. But certainly happy to answer other questions that folks may have about organic certification that may not apply to record keeping specifically. And I will also say that I can see the chat, I think, but I'm going to keep it closed. I think Jennifer's going to monitor it. And so if you have questions along the way, certainly, toss them out there, put them in the chat or something like that. Happy to take a pause and dig into that specifically. So the rule says, right, so all of this stuff is under 7 CFR part 205. And I would say if you need some heavy reading to get yourself to bed at night, the organic regulations are a good thing to go for. But at any rate, 205, part 205, 103 is the record keeping section by certified operations. And so this is the rule language specifically here. And I'm not going to read through it all, but some takeaways that you want to keep in mind with the way that the rules are written are there's a lot of musts, there's a lot of shalls, and there's a lot of mays. And so within that, there's some gray areas and some interpretations. And I will say that we're one of, I think at this point, it's about 90 accredited certifiers within the US and globally that are accredited to administer the National Organic Program rules. And some of those interpretations vary a little bit, specifically around production. But I think the rule, the record keeping section of the rule is certainly pretty consistent, and most certifiers are going to be requiring the same thing. And as an operation, you have the ability to choose a certifier of your choosing. There are several that work nationally. There are some that work regionally. And so all that to say, this the record keeping section here is a must. So a certified operation must maintain records concerning production, harvesting, and handling of agricultural products. And as far as the 100% organic and made with, that's a separate section of the rule around labeling and product composition, et cetera. So at any rate, 205, 103, very important part of the rule, something that most producers and the certifiers certainly are aware of. So 103 goes on to speak about, again, a must. Such records must be adapted for the particular business that the certified operation is conducting, fully disclose all activities and transactions of the certified operation in sufficient detail. So some of these things that are underlined are really the important components of the rule and where certifiers may focus in on, as to be readily understood and audited. And I think that's an important part of this, because the records need to fully disclose activity, but there's no specific, you have to do it this way, you have to use this system. It's just that they need to fully disclose activities, and they need to be in sufficient detail as to be readily understood and audited by the certifier, by the organic inspector that's going to be coming out and inspecting your farm and conducting some of these record keeping checks and things like that. And then it's an important note that the operation is required to keep records for 5 years beyond their creation. So that's, again, I think good for business, good for taxes, but that 5-year window is required for the operation. The certifier is actually required to keep records for 10 years. And then the last part, B4, be sufficient to demonstrate compliance. And I think that that's a really important takeaway as well, is that there are many different ways to demonstrate compliance. And so, we'll get into that a little bit further here, but, and then the last part of it is the certified operation must make such records available for inspection and copying, which is kind of the rules outdating itself a little bit because it was developed in the 90s. Normal business hours, authorized representatives, et cetera. So the point being is that if you're looking at certification, if you're already certified and your inspector contacts you and says, hey, I want to come and conduct your inspection on this day, that's that time period where you really want to start preparing and kind of making sure that you've got all of your records available for the inspector, because that is something that we cite fairly frequently, that there were some records missing at the time of inspection. Jennifer, I see a few things in the chat, but anything that you just stopped for?
Nope, just folks introducing themselves so far.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Yep.
So one of the things that comes with organic certification, and maybe even, an NRCS grant about soil health, or any of these types of things, is monitoring, record keeping. Those types of things are going to be involved in all of that. And so we like to talk, and there are a lot of operations that sort of ask about, this is the worst part of certification, is the record keeping. What can be done to minimize the burden of record keeping, throughout the course of the season, et cetera. And so one of the things that we like to point out for folks is that there are a lot of certifiers who will accept what's known as a standard operating procedure. And so this is just the Wikipedia definition of this. But I think it's important to point out that there are a lot of aspects of farming and production that can be encapsulated in an SOP, especially if they're done, if a task is done the same way every time. And so I've got a number of examples in the next slides to just sort of get everybody thinking about that. But I think it's an important thing for folks to think about, because what can happen with an SOP is, if it's, hey, this is how we do a particular task every single time, you can develop that SOP, you can train your farm crew and your employees around that SOP, and then your record keeping is just then, yeah, the SOP was followed today, but you don't have to necessarily list out the detail. And so I think that that's certainly something to kind of keep in mind. And we accept a lot of SOPs, standard operating procedures. If you're a processor handler, their files are usually full of what's called SSOPs, which is a sanitation standard operating procedure, specific to sanitation, which again is going to be a daily task, cleaning equipment, et cetera. So the caveats there to keep in mind is the SOP, they can minimize the detail of the record, but some documentation still is required to exist. So that can be a lot of different things, daily logs. And then if there is a deviation from the SOP for whatever reason, then that's where the sort of the record keeping would be, would come into play, where you have, on this day, we moved away from our SOP for this particular reason. We've got to jot a little bit more detail down in the record. And then the last piece is the SOPs are part of the organic system plan, which is the overall kind of mechanics of the certification process. And so the certifier is going to be certifying to your organic system plan and then verifying your organic system plan on site through the inspection process as well. So some of the SOP examples that I sort of was thinking about here. So the seed search process, right? So there's a seed search component in the organic regulations, and at least our certification interpretation of that, which is non-organic seeds can be used, if the variety, quantity, or quality that you're looking for can't be found. And so in that sense, we would accept someone's organic versus non-organic seed percentages based on whether or not they had seed search records, which we, as a certifier, we require 3 different sources, likely sources of organic seed, to be at least reviewed and checked, catalogs or websites and things like that, to go for the organic variety versus not. There's certainly caveats around, there's no GMO seed can be used, and then no prohibited substances, whether it's prohibited inoculants or seed coatings or the like. But so that's a situation where if a producer consistently searches the same set of potential sources, in our areas, is it Johnny's Fedco high mowing? That can be something where you wouldn't necessarily have to keep that record if you had an SOP that was put together that just said to the certifier, yeah, I check these 3 sources every year within this time period when inventory will be likely to be there. So I would say the second one being crops or enterprises going through the same process. If you're applying the specific fertilizer or compost at time of planting and transplanting, that can be an SOP. Soil mixes, compost tea recipes, fertilizer rates and applications. Those are all certainly things that can be included within that SOP thinking. If you're a parallel producer, which is somebody that's producing certified organic crops as well as non-certified organic crops, the certifier is going to ask you for systems and critical control points to be in place to make sure that there's no commingling or contact with prohibited substances. And so if you've got organic and non-organic products, how are they being kept separate? These are a few examples here that we see often: leasing greenhouse space to a non-certified producer, producing seedlings for a non-certified producer, cleaning, sanitizing, or purging a space between processing conventional and organic products. So that would be, if you're using the same equipment to process through some kind of an intervening event between the non-organic and the organic to ensure that the contamination commingling requirements are met. Cabinet spaces for livestock medications, and a way to differentiate livestock treated conventionally, whether that's a withholding period or a prohibited from slaughter stock situation. And then as far as cleaning and sanitizing, again, protocols for food contact areas with approved products, machinery and supplies, seeds, produce, boxes, those types of things. So those are all things that we, and then pest controls, of course, facility pest controls, et cetera. A few more here: rotational grazing schedule from a livestock dairy perspective. If that's consistent, and then if there's variations, based on weather or whatnot, you would record the variation. If you've got specific feed and mixed rations for different types of livestock groups, that can certainly be something. And then even as far as how livestock and products are transported between facilities, if that's applicable to your operation. So as far as just generally thinking about what records should be kept, and I am hopeful to just flip over my shared screen, and I was going to get to our certification website and just go through some of the checklists and templates that we provide and make available to our producers and to the public. But as far as what records should be kept, generally I would say use of checklists, I think, is an important thing overall to think about, especially if you're using them to train employees or to keep crews on task. You definitely want to be keeping all receipts for, I put a few examples in here, your seed purchases, because the certifier is going to come in and do a seed, organic to non-organic seed calculation. That's a question that we ask in our system plan application paperwork. If you're purchasing perennials or planting stock, where there's the requirement that you've got to manage them for 12 months organically prior. If you're purchasing non-organic planting stock perennials, managed organically for 12 months prior to being able to market any products from harvests as organic. So the inspector is going to check those dates, fertility inputs, pesticides. All of those kind of things. Anything that you would be thinking. And again, from a business perspective, you may need to be keeping those for taxes and other purposes anyway, but those are things that you want to be keeping in mind. And so in a lot of cases, if somebody's ordering seeds from from Johnny, say, or High Mowing, you're going to get a digital invoice potentially. Maybe you've got a folder in your email where you just keep all your receipts coming through there. Obviously, if you get a paper receipt, you want to tuck that away somewhere as well. So certifiers, and we do in a lot of cases too, they may accept sales records as harvest records or vice versa if all the product is sold at a farmer's market, as example. So, there are kind of ways to be thinking about, and I would say in some cases, if you're using Square or some other kind of point of sale, situation at the direct to consumer level, then you may have those reports available as well. So something to keep in mind there. Sales invoices, especially if you're selling organic and non-organic mixed, you're going to want to make sure that they're designated as organic on the invoice, and then those invoices are checked as part of our traceability and mass balance exercises. And yeah, mass balance traceability. So we use those to test and demonstrate compliance on the record keeping side, and they're required and they're performed at every inspection, regardless of how big or small the operation is. Considering lot numbering, certainly a good thing to think about, and which is good for a lot of reasons, and potentially required for GAP or HACCP, or in terms of wholesale transactions, et cetera. The ability to be able to track particular lots is important. for a lot of food safety scenarios as well. So other types of records, thinking about just the production side of things, crop rotation, planting dates, and crop rotation, I would say would certainly come into effect in terms of soil health, and some of those requirements based on some other things there. Planting dates, field activity, which would be, if you're mending, if you're cultivating weeds, all of those types of things that would be happening within the structure of your production. And production aids, if it's mulch or foliar sprays, et cetera. Compost production, if you're producing compost on site, there's specific requirements for under the organic regulations that require a certain temperature over a certain period of time to ensure that the risk of pathogen is reduced there. So all of those things are, and temperature records, all of that stuff is something that the certifier is going to be looking at. So generally, the value of record keeping. So again, I'm usually out there, selling certification. Hey, this is a good thing to do, right? It's the fastest growing sector in the grocery business. More and more customers are becoming aware. They want to know more about how their food's grown. They want that relationship with the producer of the food that they're consuming and feeding their families. And so, along those lines, the value of record keeping, you're going to satisfy your certifier and the NOP regulations. You'll have these situations. I mean, it's one of the most common things that we cite and in inspection when we're reviewing post-inspection review and producing a letter and making certification decisions about new applicants getting certified or existing producers renewing their certification each year, is that the record keeping is something that we'll say, hey, you were missing the receipts for your compost for this year, and those are all listed as conditions for continued certification or conditions for certification, where we say it's just a minor issue, but we want to see improvements, and we'll look for that at the next inspection. So yeah, managing soil health plus your planning, right? So part of the crop rotation requirements, you can't necessarily plant the same, crop family year after year after year in the same place. So the certifier is going to be looking for your rotation plans. And so having those records from the previous year and your plan for the coming year, and having those, in whatever cycle that needs to be for compliance there is important. Traceability and limiting the impact of recalls. So, as far as like GAP certification, there's a mock recall, component to that. And so, it's certainly very good to be thinking about not having to pull all of your products if for whatever reason there's a food safety issue. And if you can if you can hone in on a particular lot, that might reduce the impact of that type of situation. The food safety requirements kind of go along with that. Certainly overall business viability, you want to know what your costs are, be able to know what your pricing set needs to be, just certainly a solid piece there. And then if you want to develop SOPs, that certainly can become part of your employee training program, and the ability to sort of hold people accountable based on having those things set up and in place. And then, substantiating the organic integrity of your product, in the marketplace to your consumers who are, concerned about those types of things. And so one of the things I did, dig into a little bit is in checking with some of our specialists in the office who maintain the direct oversight of our client files. And so one of the things, as far as acceptable, apps or technology, I mentioned at the beginning that we see all kinds of different types of record keeping systems. We have farms that keep all of their receipts in a shoebox. We have folks that have elaborate spreadsheets. We have folks that use notebooks and binders. All of that stuff is acceptable. There's no specific, prescriptive, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. The records just need to be there. They need to be easily auditable and understood, and they need to be able to demonstrate compliance with the rule. And so we see spreadsheets, Google, Excel, Open Office, et cetera. We have some folks that use Slack. And so it's one of those things where, you get the whole crew and the team on the same Slack channel. Somebody's putting in that they've gone and, weeded the pepper row or something like that. Those are things that we certainly have seen, and we accept those as viable records. And then some of the apps that we've seen some of the farms use, Light Farm, COG Pro, COG Pro, Cost of Goods Pro, Veggie Tables, Ag Squared, and then Tend, which sounds like you had that had an overview of Tend there. So there's certainly more out there. Those were just some that I was able to find, at least within our organic system plans when I was searching in our database. And so I guess at this point, I've got a few slides that just kind of cover our website, and I certainly invite anybody to check that out. One of the nice things about having so much of our information on our website is that we, as a certifier, our inspectors are included in that, our reviewers at the office. We can't advise farms on how to be compliant with the regulations because it's considered a conflict of interest. Because we're certifying them, we can't also tell them what to do and how to be compliant. And so with MAFGA, you know, we're fortunate where we as a certifier, our parent company has other program areas that do a lot of technical assistance with farms. But we feel like with our website, the National Organic Program, USDA, has basically said, yeah, if it's public facing, if it's available to everybody, then it's not considered a conflict of interest. It's not considered, providing one-to-one technical assistance and helping somebody out when we shouldn't be doing that as a certifier. So all that to say is that we load our website with lots of things that we hope are beneficial for producers, and you all are certainly welcome to visit our site, mafgacertification.org. And so this is just a screenshot of our homepage, and I'll get into the menu pieces here in a second. So if you go to our page, the resources drop down, our practice manual for producers. It's a 100-page document, but it's easy to navigate. You can use the Control F function, and you can sort of search on keywords. And so there's a whole section in there about record keeping, and then there's a whole section, and then beyond that, each of the sections are broken up by production scope. So we have guidelines for crop production, processing and handling. We certify sea vegetables up here in Maine, so we have a section on that, livestock, dairy, et cetera. And so that's certainly a good resource there, and it's a PDF that you can download. We also have paper copies at our office. You can contact our office and we can mail you one, not a problem there. And so the practice manual I've circled, and then at the very bottom of that drop down, we have record keeping for organic producers. And this is where we've gone ahead and we've developed checklists. So these 6 checklists here are basically what we would pass on as advisement to an operation and say, hey, if you're a crop producer, these are generally the records that you're going to want to be thinking about keeping. And so we've broken that out, again, up here in Maine, we've got a lot of wild blueberry acres that we certify. So we have a specific checklist for that. Otherwise, the 3 major components and production scopes, crop, processing and handling, livestock, dairy, and then we have a separate maple syrup one as well, because we certify 55 maple operations in Maine as well. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to try to bounce over to our website real quick, because I just wanted to show you it's just that specific page and sort of what the detail is there here. So within this page, again, you can click on the different links. You can download these as well. And so this is just following up with what I was discussing in some of the slides earlier, which is, these are different things, okay, records you want to keep, seed, seedling, perennial planting stock records. So the documentation, the verification of seeds that are non-organic, they're not genetically modified. And then, as far as seed saving, you want to show harvest records and production of organic seed, any pelleting materials that are NOP compliant, material application records. So this sort of speaks to the fertility amendments and, pesticide, fungicides, those types of things that you would want to be using throughout the course of the year. Manure application records, rate and date are what we're looking for there. Any production aids like mulches, foliar sprays. And then as far as production records, you can see here, crop rotation, field activity, compost. And there's there's certainly a lot of sharing of equipment. We understand that not every farm is going to have their own tractor and implements and things like that. So a lot of times there's a sharing or a leasing or contracting with somebody else. And so if you're contracting with somebody that's also using that equipment on non-organic land, there needs to be some type of an intervening event, pressure washing down the plows or the discs or whatever. And so that's an equipment cleanout record that you'd want to be saying, oh yeah, Farmer Joe from up the road came down. He tilled in a couple of beds for me, and here's the cleaning log that shows that he pressure washed it off before he came, and et cetera. So that, and then 1 year transition records for perennials, harvest, storage, and sale records. Again, there's details there. And then general record keeping, we've got a section on that as well. So yeah, land has to be free from prohibited substance for 36 months. So there might be some records there, or landowner affidavit in place, field histories showing sort of the crop rotation and things like that. So all of that is, just wanted to show you kind of a quick view of what that looks like. And then lastly, excuse me, we do have some templates listed on that same page. So we have a field activity log template that just kind of shows you generally what we're looking for there. There's other input records, compost, planting stock. There's that equipment clean out log, harvest records. Those are just some general things. We certainly have goals to put more of those things up there, but at this point, that's what we got to offer, and certainly hope that y'all will at least check those out just to get a better sense and have that as a resource. And I think I'll go ahead and stop there. Hand it over.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Are there any questions from participants who are on the website before we launch into Jed's presentation? Folks, any questions about the certification process or record keeping, all the requirements? I know it's a lot of detail. You're welcome to put questions in the chat or unmute yourself and ask the question too. We're a pretty small group, so happy to do that, or we can hear from Jed and think about what other questions you might have, and we'll circle back.
Yeah, and I did give Jennifer the PDF of the slide deck as well, and so that's got live links and things like that, and so that can be a resource for you.
Great, I'll send that out afterwards. So thank you for sending that. All right, not seeing any other questions. Jed, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Jennifer mentioned, my name is Jed Beach. My wife and I own and operate 3 Bug Farm in Lincolnville, Maine, where we grow certified organic fruits and vegetables. I also operate FarmSmart Business Services in the winter, which is my practice where I help farmers with their business planning and financial analysis, and sometimes record keeping too. I'm here, my talk today is mainly with my 3 Bug Farm hat on. I'm just going to give an example of some of our record keeping that we keep during the talk today, but I'll also be happy to talk about some of the things that I've seen other farmers use that are effective, especially if you have any specific questions. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen. I don't have a PowerPoint, but I do have, I brought our website up and I have some examples of some of our record keeping. So when my wife and I first laid eyes on the land that became 3 Bug Farm, we were 4 years into a pretty exhaustive and dispiriting land search at that point. And we pulled up to this big open field that was a kind of a rundown Christmas tree farm. And my wife said, without getting out of the car, she said, "This is it. This is where we're gonna farm." And I said, "Well, don't you want to get out of the car first?" And she said, "No, this is it. I know this is it." And one of the things that really jumped out at us was that the fields were awash in all type of insect life. In particular, there were a whole bunch of dragonflies and swallowtail butterflies that day, and at night there were fireflies everywhere. We vowed that when we did start farming there, we vowed that we would make sure to farm in such a way that insects like those 3 bugs and their brethren would always have a home on our farm. And so that's really why we decided to become certified organic as a means of honoring that promise that we made. So this is all to say that soil health is very important to us. And being certified organic is very important to us too. You can see a couple of the pictures here. We grow a lot of black raspberries, which are the easiest cane fruit to grow organically, in my opinion. And then we have a lot of cherry tomatoes, and we grow about 50 other vegetable crops with a somewhat of a slant or a focus on salad mix and herbs and tomatoes. So now I'll take us to a soil test that we took last year. Last year, in maybe early August or so, we started to notice that some of the crops in one of our fields, one of our more productive fields, which we call the lower dry field, were not performing the way they should. They were showing some signs of malnutrition. It had been a very wet July last year. I don't know what it was like where you were, but it rained almost every day on the coast of Maine here in July. Horrible black raspberry year, unfortunately, as a result, but it is what it is. We thought, or we theorized, that the malnutrition that we were observing was the result of the fertilizer that we had applied in the spring being leached away. So we did 2 things. One is we were in the middle of the season, so I increased the amount of fertilizer that we were side dressing at the time. And then the second is that we took the soil test. And when the soil test came back, it showed us that we had misdiagnosed the problem. You can see here way too much nitrate, nitrogen. That's the effect of me probably over-fertilizing at the time. And a pH level of 5.7, which is below, we definitely want to get to around 6.5 or so. So this says to us, oh, okay, well, we have our soil pH has lowered over time. It was at about 5.5 when we bought the property. We applied a whole bunch of lime, and it was up around 6.5 for most of our farming time. And then it seemed to have dropped precipitously in 2021 for reasons that I still need to understand. But in any event, this showed us that we needed to apply some kind of powder or amendment to raise the pH. The Extension Service recommends using magnesium lime. We prefer high cal lime. So the next step in this process is we calculated how much high cal lime we would need to get our pH back up to its optimum level. And so now I'm going to move away from the soil test and to our planning tool that we use. And while it's loading, I should explain. We do all of our farm planning on a spreadsheet. We're big spreadsheet users. I'm a big proponent of spreadsheets in general. One of our main tools that we use in our big spreadsheet is called our to-do list. And this is where we put everything that we are going to do on our farm. And sometimes in our personal lives too. This is our giant kind of master checklist for everything. Often the things that end up on this list are things that are generated during our weekly meetings. So that's a lot of what you're seeing here is, the result of our weekly meeting this week. And, we've got a lot of kind of off-season things to do, communicating to our customers about seedlings, measuring dimensions for a new fridge. I need to email Caleb, who works for MOFGA, about some recommendations for organic mouse control. We're starting to keep some bees next year, so Amelia has some beekeeping homework to do, and so on and so forth. You can, all of these things end up onto this list. But also what ends up onto this list are the planned activities that we are going to, that we're planning on making in the coming growing season, especially those that involve inputs, right, into our fields. So you can see now here, right after you see this date 120, which is this week, there's a bunch of dates that are much further forward in the future into 2022. These are the inputs that we are intending to apply. And I'm adding them here, ahead of time to help me figure out what our field plan is and to help me figure out how much of each of these things I need to purchase. So now I'm going to show you on this form. There's a section where I keep track of specifically the fields and inputs that we are applying. So now I'm going to jump down to the line just to follow kind of through the story that I was telling about the soil test earlier. So here on row 38 is this activity that I'm planning on applying lime on or around April 15th. Whenever it's dry enough to get out there and do so. And we're going to apply it to the lower dry field. Here's the input that I'm going to apply. Sorry, it's skipping around on me. It's a little slow, I think, because I've got zoom on it as well. Here is the input that we're going to apply, the high cal lime. We categorize our crops into different groupings, which helps me manage the information and calculate how much we need. We're applying a rate per bed foot of about 0.4 pounds, which is what I've calculated we need in order to raise the pH to the level that we need. And over here, it shows that in this field total, we're going to need to apply 2,431 pounds or so of high cal lime. This is helpful for me because then I can go over to our inputs order list where I have some formulas that help me calculate how much I'm going to need of each of the things we're going to apply. So I can place our supply orders, which I did this week. So this is not the high cal lime, this is black plastic mulch, but this column right here shows me that I need to buy about 4,700 feet of black plastic mulch in order to meet what we're going to need this year. So then I've got this plan, right? I'm going to apply this lime on or around this date to the lower dry field, and we're going to apply it to these different crops, which are spelled out on a separate tab in this sheet. But to the crops that we're growing under black plastic mulch and the crops that we are the leafy greens that we are direct seeding, which are what we're growing in this plot in this year. So then each week, after we have brainstormed all of the things that we need to do based on a field walk that we've taken or just the things that are on our minds, I will then filter this list by just clearing out all, by only filtering the things that, the tasks that are assigned for that particular week, like so. And then I'll print this list out in a physical form. So it shows me what I'm supposed to do. It shows, we also keep track of who's doing it. So J, that's me. E, that's Amelia. These question marks are as yet to be hired employees for the year. And then it spells out specifically in a hard copy what we're applying, how much, on what field to what crops. Then, once I have that physical printed list, I'll go out and actually apply the lime, and I'll write down on that hard copy the actual date that I applied it and how much I actually applied and any other notes that I want to add that, if something happened differently than what we planned. And then when our organic certifier wants to see our records of what we actually did, I can hand them the hard copy sheets to show what we've actually done over the course of the year. This is also helpful for us because we make this list includes everything we do each year, and we can go back and look through years and years of these kinds of task lists in spreadsheet form to see what we've done and to see if we've encountered a problem before and what we did to try to encounter it and so on. It forms kind of like our institutional memory, I guess is the right word for it. So I guess, that's the whirlwind tour. I will say that, for us, we evolved this system because we found that when the record keeping, was a struggle for us at first, to be quite honest about it. We were having trouble remembering that we needed to keep records in the middle of the season when things were going crazy. But we always made these kinds of task lists in one form or another. And just about everyone does. When you're heading out the door in the morning to start your day, you usually make a list of some kind, whether or not it's on a piece of paper or on a computer program like this or on your phone, you're making a list. And in our experience, and also I think in the experience in many of the farms that I've worked with on these projects, the people that convert their task lists, their to-do lists, into their records tend to be much more successful at actually following through on the record keeping, because it's all one system, as opposed to trying to have like your plan over in one system and your records in another system. All right. So my presentation was not nearly as long and detailed as Chris's, but I'd be happy to take any questions if anyone wants to about our record keeping system or any other questions you might have.
I had a question for you, Jed. It looks like, so you create a new spreadsheet each year, or is it sequential down the spreadsheet so that you can kind of search by years?
Yeah, we copy a new one every year. That's one of the places where, spreadsheets aren't databases. And, if I were to try to kind of accumulate, 10 years in a single spreadsheet, it might really slow down. But we do have the other spreadsheets saved that we can refer to.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it was great. I like how it integrates your task list with your record keeping as well. I think that makes a lot of sense. So thanks for showing that example. Sure. Are there questions that folks have for either Jed or Chris that we can answer, folks that are on the call? Don't be shy. Should I call on folks? Jim, do you have any questions that you'd like to answer or have answered, or Michael or Julie or Mohammed or Laura or Sonia? All right, Michael said he doesn't have any questions right now. Okay. Are there other folks who have questions? All right, Laura doesn't have questions. But yeah, appreciates the overview to help think about our own systems while winter planning and always looking for spreadsheet inspirations. So that's great. Yeah, it was nice to see that example, Jed. I liked how you had your check boxes of who was doing it, and yeah, lots of personal and farm chores intermingled. And then yeah, it's something that you'll use because you're going back to it for everything in your life, which is great. That's right. That's right. Yeah, we definitely do mingle the personal and the farm on that task list. It's not there's no separation there. Yeah. I guess I had another general question. So thinking about, we work with a lot of new and beginning farmers, and, if they're considering becoming certified organic, it seems like a lot of prep work, obviously, both to put together the application and to think through all the SOPs and the details and the rules and develop all of your kind of systems that you want to put in place. And it looks like you have a lot of great resources to help people get started on the website, but do either of you have any recommendations of other examples or places people can go to really, look for inspiration, I guess, to make sure that they're covering all their bases or not needing to start to develop an SOP from scratch? I mean, I know everything needs to be customized per individual farm, but either of you have other recommendations for things that you've seen that work well, or people that you've consulted with to help them get started.
Yeah. I mean, we're really spoiled in Maine because we have MOFGA, which, not only is there the MOFGA certification services, but I think Chris alluded to, MOFGA has a whole arm of its operation that helps farmers with organic production. And, so certainly a new farm if you're starting a certified operation in Maine, you've got a lot of really great people that can help you out at MOFGA itself. It's not like that in every state, but that's why it's great to be a farmer in Maine.
Exactly.
Yeah. I would say, I mean, I think in New England, we're in a really good space because, Maine, there's MOFGA, but, there's a NOFA New Hampshire, NOFA Vermont, NOFA New York, NOFA Mass, NOFA Connecticut. I'm not sure about Rhode Island, but, certainly I think that those associations are definitely good resources, not only because they would potentially have capacity to be able to, help and work with you one-on-one, which I think sometimes is important. But they also, they're all built on peer-to-peer learning. I think that that's a huge component of MOFGA's work, is that, we're all in this together. And, if we gather up as a group of farmers and producers, chances are you're going to learn something that you didn't know before, from somebody else. And there's just that open sharing that I think is really important in all of this. And because a lot of the components are very similar, if you're thinking about kind of the farm scope and things like that, it's a lot of the same, right? It's like, the land is a piece, right? You've got to be thinking about, your land and it was great to hear Jed, the story of you all finding that spot in Lincolnville and where the name of your farm came from. And so those are the types of things I think where it's, you're starting there, you want to think about the 36-month transition period, which is, last date of prohibited substance to the first date of harvest, basically. And that's a requirement across the board. But, so I think that that's certainly a component to think about. I will say too, USDA does have a lot of resources around organic certification. ATRA has a lot of publications that may be able to assist. I think there's templates, there's organic system plan templates out there that you could sort of look at. And then, I think certainly as far as and in Maine, I know that there's one entity that is, so NRCS has a transition program, and they'll fund a transition, somebody to basically assist with somebody that wants to transition to organic production. And so I know at least in Maine, there's one entity called Northern Tilth that is an NRCS, licensed, I guess, approved transition entity. And I don't know if that's the case in Massachusetts, if there are folks that would actually get a little bit of funding from NRCS to cover that cost to help somebody one-on-one to fill out the application. And then lastly, I would say that with organic certification, the first year, the application year, is always the hardest, because, and the one thing to keep in mind is that once you answer all those questions in the application materials, once you build out your organic system plan that first year, each year after that, you're kind of renewing your certification, but you're only making changes to your organic system plan as needed, as necessary. And so, I think in the case of like looking at Jed's spreadsheet, there's the crop planning, there's the fertility pieces, those are things certainly that shift year to year, but there may be 3/4 of the questions that you answered in the application the first year that you don't touch. And the updating process is just exactly that. It's just, you're making changes and updates to reflect your plan for that coming growing season. And so, again, your field history form, it's going to have the 3 previous years and what you're expecting to do in that field or plot, in the coming year. And so all that to say is just the beginning pieces are certainly a heavy lift, but it does get easier over time, especially once you get systems in place that make it work for yourself and work for the certifier and those types of things.
Great. Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Yeah, and I'll look for some of the examples of the organic system plan templates to send out to folks too, if they're curious about where to get started. Great. Jed, what would you say is the hardest part of maintaining your certification from year to year, or is there a hard part? What challenges do you run into?
Interesting question. The hardest part. I mean, at this point, I think as Chris mentioned, it's much harder in the beginning when you're building the plan. At this point, we don't really think of the, maintaining certification as a particularly difficult thing to do. It takes me probably an hour and a half now to do to update the system plan in the spring. It's really easy. I'm just going through what's already on file and making a few changes. And then, we enjoy the site visits. I mean, probably the hardest thing is I love it when the inspectors come in the middle of the season, but then, they're coming, when they show up on like our busiest harvest day or something, it's, always a little bit hard to handle a organic inspection when there's a lot of other things going on. But I certainly understand why they're coming during the busy season too.
Yeah, exactly. They want to be in the action.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Jed, about the, with the site visit. And, we certainly, as the certifier and as we, communicate and assign inspectors, I mean, our expectation is that the inspector is going to be as efficient as possible to verify those aspects of the organic system plan. We understand that, farmers are extremely busy, and certainly if it's a harvest day or if it's a market day or something like that, I mean, there's flexibility around the scheduling of that. And I will say that sometimes, having your records, all together and all of those pieces that the inspector is going to be looking at, that can certainly shorten up the inspection time, because, it's much easier for them to do the mass balance or the traceability or something like that. And the inspection gets longer if the records are, oh, I got to go back to the house for that or this or that, just lots of those different things, will sort of take up more time than maybe it would be otherwise. So, certainly something to think about in terms of prepping for the inspection. And I actually think there's a pretty good ATRA publication about preparing for your organic inspection that might be helpful as well.
Wonderful. Well, I will post the post-assessment poll for those of folks that are still on the webinar here. If you want to fill that out while you're thinking of any other questions that you have, or advice or stories that you'd like to share about organic certification, or even soil health practices. I know, Jed, you alluded to that a little bit, some of the things that you're doing, monitoring your soil testing and things like that. I feel like soil health is such a big topic right now and so important in terms of the climate crisis. And, people are really looking to farmers to manage soil health and draw down carbon from the atmosphere. Are there any special practices that you'd like to share with the group about what you're doing, or even Chris, what you're seeing other farms doing that you're working with around soil health practices and best practices?
Well, the current, vogue is the, there's a big surge in no-till organic practices going on in Maine. There's one farm, Frith Farm, that really has been, singing that gospel for years now, and it's really taking hold. So I see a lot of farms, either experimenting with, no-till organic, so layering huge amounts of compost on the tops of beds and mulching the aisles, and just aerating with a broad fork, if at all, and doing this very intensively. I see a lot of people, cutting their acreage down and growing much more intensively on smaller plots. And some people are shifting their entire production, over to that pretty dramatically. So that's the big trend that I'm seeing right now. That's soil health related.
Yeah, and I'll add, in addition to, yes, the no-till, certainly, even the use of sort of like, tarping for the weed kill, and, just, yeah, no disc whatsoever. But the other thing that, we're seeing a lot more of is the use of cover cropping and green manuring, which, in the case of, say, a no-till situation, it's like a lot of times that, you're just maybe breaking that, turning it back in, using a winter kill situation or something like that. So, that's definitely something. And in terms of, even interplanting, as the season progresses, towards harvest, especially with, being in the Northeast. I mean, if you're thinking about waiting until you're, harvesting up your storage crops to then plant a cover crop, it's like, I mean, especially where, Aroostook County here is, that's kind of a non-existent thought up there is, you don't want to necessarily be kind of finishing out the season with bare soil. And so I think, keeping that in mind as far as, the crop rotation and the planning, intercropping, no-till, I mean, all of those things I think are hugely beneficial in that way. And there are those provisions in the regulations around, making sure that you're not contributing to sort of erosion of, water bodies and contamination, things like that. And then obviously, I think a good example about how unpredictable the seasons are becoming, whether you get a super wet spring and you can't get out into the fields, when you're thinking about when you want to be having your fertility and inputs going down, or maybe it's a full month of rain in July, or, I mean, as the case a couple of years ago, we had an extreme drought in Maine where all 16 counties in Maine were designated as drought disaster areas, and, dry pastures, those kind of things. So I think all of that is really, we're seeing a lot of good things happen, at least in the farms in Maine here. And I definitely think that's going to continue as the conversation moves forward.
Yeah, super important stuff. Farming is not getting any easier with all the management considerations and weather changes and things like that we're dealing with. So great. Well, I'll just put out one last call for other questions if folks have them. Otherwise, we can end early this evening. But this is really great. I feel like there's a lot of information that was shared and a lot of great, so good example, Jed, of all the work that you're doing to keep records and integrate your production and record keeping requirements, and a lot of great resources that both of you shared that I've been taking notes on that I'll send out links to as a follow-up. So are there any other final questions, Jim, Julie, Mohammed, anyone else? Or any other final comments, Jed or Chris, you'd like to share before we close out?
No, this has been great. Thanks for the opportunity. And yeah, Jed, I appreciate you joining us. It was great to see those examples, and certainly always good to get the farm examples and the direct perspective versus the certification director, in a bunch of slides.
Sure, my pleasure. This was fun. Thank you.
Great. Well, yeah, thank you so much to you both for all of your support and knowledge that you shared this evening. And this will be, again, the recording will be posted to our YouTube channel, so a lot of other folks will benefit from the knowledge that you shared tonight. So thanks so much again, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thanks. You too. Good luck out there.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.